I thought I had my secrets under control, but one photo, just one, brought my carefully hidden betrayal crashing into the open. What I didn't expect was that my husband had secrets of his own, and the truth was far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. Since my college days, I believed life followed a straightforward path: school, career, love, and eventually, family. My early 20s were filled with ambition and optimism, a time when it felt like the world was mine to shape. During grad school, I met Adam. Together, we envisioned a future built on shared goals, a cozy home, thriving careers, and the kind of stability we both craved. For years, everything seemed to unfold just as planned. But lately, something had shifted. The excitement we once had about our accomplishments started to fade, replaced by a quiet dissatisfaction I couldn't explain. Beneath the surface of our perfectly mapped-out life, I felt an ache for something I couldn't quite name, a longing for more than the carefully constructed existence Adam and I had built. The company dinner that night didn't help. The laughter from across the room grated on my nerves, making me feel even more out of place. It wasn't that I disliked my co-workers, they were pleasant enough, but most of them were fresh-faced and buzzing with the kind of youthful energy that made me feel my 36 years more than I wanted to. I hadn't planned on attending the event. Adam was working late and couldn't come, and the dinner itself, a celebration for a promotion in another department, felt like a formality. But the unease I'd been feeling for weeks lingered, and avoiding the night altogether wouldn't have solved it. On paper, everything was fine: a good job, a loving husband, a comfortable home. But I couldn't shake the nagging questions: was this enough? Was this all there was? Adam had been hinting more and more about starting a family, but the idea left me restless. Many of my friends were already knee-deep in parenthood, balancing diapers and playdates, but to me, the thought of committing to that kind of life felt overwhelming. It seemed final, too final. I wasn't there yet, no matter how much I tried to convince myself I still had time. Across the room, a group of younger women danced and chatted, their animated energy in stark contrast to my mood. They'd been welcoming enough when I joined the company, but it was clear they saw me as older, someone not entirely one of them. That realization stung more than I cared to admit. "That's quite the racket they're making," a voice beside me said. Startled, I turned to see Ryan Harper, one of my colleagues, standing there. He raised an eyebrow, a teasing smile playing on his lips. I chuckled, quickly regaining my composure. "Isn't that group a gold mine for someone like you?" I said, half joking. Ryan, known for his quick wit and effortless charm, smirked. "Tried that already," he replied, shaking his head. "Way too giggly and immature for my taste." With a playful glint in his eye, he began impersonating some of them, exaggerating their mannerisms in a way that had me laughing harder than I had in weeks. I was surprised by how funny and insightful he was. We'd worked together for a couple of years, but this side of him was new to me. Before I realized it, I was completely engrossed in our conversation. He had this natural way of making me feel comfortable, as though I'd known him forever. "So, Claire," Ryan said, leaning against the bar, "what's got you looking like you'd rather be anywhere but here tonight?" I hesitated, unsure of how much I wanted to reveal. "Just a long week, I guess," I said finally. "And I'm not sure this is really my scene anymore." He nodded knowingly. "I get that. These kinds of events can feel forced sometimes." Then, with a wry smile, he added, "But hey, if you've made it this far, you deserve a medal." I laughed, shaking my head. "Well, I'm not sure I'll survive the night, but thanks for the vote of confidence." As the evening wore on, our conversation flowed effortlessly, and I found myself letting my guard down more than I expected. Ryan had a way of making the room, and the doubts swirling in my mind, fade into the background. By the time I left, I couldn't help but feel a little lighter, though I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. I hadn't noticed we were among the last at the party until I checked my watch. "Wow, it's late," I said, shaking my head. "I should get home before Adam starts to worry." Ryan grabbed my coat from the rack and held it out for me. "Here," he said with a grin, "let me." His gesture was smooth and casual, as though it was second nature. Once we reached my car, I couldn't resist teasing him. "So, Ryan, what is your type?" I asked playfully, raising an eyebrow. Without missing a beat, he leaned slightly against the door and said, "That's easy, someone like you." Then, before I could process his words, he winked, closed the door for me, and turned to walk away. I sat in stunned silence, gripping the steering wheel as his words replayed in my mind. Was he flirting with me? That didn't seem possible. I'm a married woman, I told myself. Yet as I drove home, a small smile crept onto my lips. Whatever his intentions, Ryan had chosen to spend the evening talking with me, and that realization brought a spark of confidence I hadn't felt in years. Maybe I'm not so over the hill after all. When I got home, Adam had just arrived too. He was sorting through the mail at the kitchen counter, still in his work clothes. "Hey, how was the dinner?" he asked, glancing up briefly. "It was fine," I replied, setting my purse down and kissing his cheek. I was surprised to feel a sudden wave of desire. Pulling Adam close, I kissed him with a level of enthusiasm that even caught me off guard. Though tired, he didn't hesitate to respond. As the moment unfolded, I couldn't ignore the familiar pattern that began to take over. After 12 years of marriage, I knew Adam's every move. He was attentive and thoughtful, always putting my needs first. But what had once been a comfort now felt predictable. Lately, I'd found myself longing for something else, though I wasn't sure what. Closing my eyes, I let my mind wander. For years, I'd imagined movie stars during these moments. Tom Hardy had been my go-to, though his recent beard had put me off. Tonight, though, it wasn't a celebrity that filled my thoughts. It was Ryan. His confident smile, the way he'd winked, the sound of his voice, they all came rushing back, sending a surprising thrill through me. When it was over, Adam caught his breath and smiled. "Wow, you were something tonight," he said, pulling me close. "All for you, love," I whispered, pressing a kiss to his cheek before slipping into the bathroom. As I stood at the sink brushing my teeth, though, my thoughts wandered back to Ryan. His parting words at the car echoed in my mind. I shook my head, frustrated with myself. By the time I returned to the bedroom, Adam was already asleep, his steady breathing filling the quiet room. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the memory of Ryan's voice. Eventually, I forced myself to push the thoughts away and drifted into an uneasy sleep. Monday morning was hectic as usual. Between back-to-back meetings and endless emails, I barely had time to breathe. Just before lunch, a knock on the side of my cubicle startled me. Looking up, I saw Ryan standing there, his easy grin as disarming as ever. "Hey, Claire," he said, leaning casually against the partition. "I could use your advice on some designs, colors, patterns, the whole deal. Think you could take a look sometime?" I flushed, annoyed at myself for the reaction, but Ryan didn't seem to notice. "Sure," I replied, forcing my voice to sound calm. "Just let me know when you're ready." A few days later, Ryan called me over to his office. We worked through some designs together, our conversation flowing as easily as it had at the party. Once we wrapped up, he offered to walk me back downstairs. "I need to get to the airport for a flight," he explained, holding the door for me as we reached the building's entrance, "but I'll be back in a few days. I'll reach out then." Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me lightly on the lips. It was so quick I barely had time to react. Stunned, I stood frozen on the curb as Ryan stepped back with a smile. "Back to work, Claire," he said casually before turning to his car. I watched him drive away, my heart pounding, unsure whether to be angry, flattered, or something else entirely. As I walked back to my office, I found myself absent-mindedly touching my lips, replaying the brief kiss from Ryan. Confusion mixed with a strange excitement coursed through me. Did that really happen? I thought, shaking my head. When Ryan had asked earlier, could you stop by for a bit? I'd nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. Perfect, he'd said, flashing another one of his disarming smiles before walking off. Now, seated at my desk, I sat in disbelief. Is this smart? I asked myself. It's just design advice, nothing else, I reassured myself, but a part of me couldn't deny feeling nervous. Why did my mind immediately go there? I shook off the thoughts when my phone rang, forcing myself to focus on work for the remainder of the day. That evening at home, I planned to mention my meeting with Ryan to Adam, not to ask for permission, but simply to keep him in the loop. Before I could bring it up, though, Adam spoke first. Do we have plans for tomorrow? He asked casually, flipping through a magazine on the couch. Not really, I said, pausing. I might swing by Ryan's office after work to look over some project designs, but that's about it. Sounds good, Adam replied, not even glancing up, his tone neutral. Relieved, I tried to let it go, but a small part of me felt annoyed that I'd even mentioned it. Why did you bring up Ryan to Adam? I wondered. I reassured myself it was harmless, I was just being transparent. The following afternoon dragged on. I checked the clock repeatedly, telling myself not to rush over right at 5 o'clock. Don't seem too eager, I muttered under my breath, trying to pace myself. By 5:15, I was at my desk, refreshing my makeup. Soon after, I was in my car, tapping my steering wheel impatiently as traffic crawled along. You're just curious about his condo, I told myself, trying to rationalize the flutter of anticipation I felt. When I arrived, Ryan opened the door, and I stepped inside, surprised by what I saw. The condo was stunning, a large open space with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing an incredible city view. A beautifully made bed sat in the corner, its sleek frame complementing the modern decor. This is amazing, I said, turning to him. Ryan moved closer, his hands sliding around my hips as he pulled me into a kiss. You're so beautiful, he murmured against my lips. I've wanted you for so long. His words sent a rush of exhilaration through me, and I didn't resist. Instead, I let myself be swept away, thinking, he wants me. This gorgeous man can't resist me. The thought filled me with a thrill I hadn't felt in years. I usually preferred things to move slower, but there was no need this time. Everything felt electric, urgent, and irresistible. Afterward, I must have dozed off, the weight of what had just happened pressing heavily on my mind. When I woke, I dreaded explaining my lateness to Adam. Still, my thoughts kept drifting back to the night and Ryan's words. When I finally arrived home, relief washed over me, Adam's car wasn't there. I undressed quickly and slipped into bed, feigning sleep when I heard him come in half an hour later. Sorry I'm so late, babe, Adam whispered softly, his voice full of affection. It's all right, I murmured, smiling in the dark. Despite my exhaustion, guilt and vivid memories waged a quiet war in my mind. What I had done was undeniably wrong, yet the night was unforgettable. My last thought before sleep claimed me was of Ryan's parting words. It's not over. By Saturday, the week's events still lingered in my mind. I kept replaying the moments with Ryan, savoring the thrill of my secret. When he invited me to lunch at his condo that day, I didn't hesitate. I knew what was coming, and if Ryan hadn't made a move, I knew I would have. By the time Ryan and I stepped inside his condo, it was as if all pretense had fallen away. We were desperate for each other, and what happened next was better than I'd imagined. It was electric, leaving me breathless and exhilarated. Walking back to my cubicle the next day, I felt euphoric, an energy buzzing through me that hadn't been there in years. I smiled at the younger coworkers, the 20-somethings who likely saw me as the dull, dependable married woman. If only they knew, I thought smugly, holding my head a little higher. Later that afternoon, I met Nancy, my closest friend, for coffee. She was someone I could confide in, though not entirely. "So, how's Adam?" she asked, stirring her latte. "Busy with work," I said dismissively. "He barely notices anything these days." I hesitated, unsure how to approach the real reason I wanted to talk. "But that's not what I came to discuss. Let me tell you about." "No," Nancy interrupted, holding up a hand. "I don't want to know who it is." She hesitated, her brow furrowing. "It's not Terry, is it?" "Of course not." I snapped, feeling a sting of offense at the suggestion. "I'd never do that to you." "But you did it to Adam," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of disappointment. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I took a slow sip of my latte, trying to steady myself as the conversation slipped further from what I had planned. Nancy's expression softened slightly, but the tension remained as she reached out, briefly touching my hand. Later that evening, I sped home, my heart pounding, hoping Adam wasn't there. I needed time to think, to steady myself after the unease Nancy's reaction had stirred. As I walked through the door, I nearly collided with Adam. "Back so soon?" he asked, glancing up from the mail. "I thought you were shopping with Nancy." I was, but my mind raced for an excuse. "I realized I left my phone at home," I said quickly, improvising. "You mean this?" Adam said, holding up my phone. My heart stopped. But he just smiled, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Found it on your dresser," he said, handing it to me. I mumbled my thanks, clutching the phone as I walked back to my car. Once inside, I slumped over the steering wheel, letting the tension melt away. Too close, I thought. I need to be more careful. Over the next few days, another thought began to creep into my mind, unbidden and bitter. Is Adam having an affair too? The idea planted itself firmly, growing stronger with each passing moment. It would explain so much, his late nights, the frequent business trips, and the emotional distance between us. He must be with someone, I thought angrily. Maybe it's Linda. The name stung, a casual acquaintance of ours who was always a little too friendly. The idea that Adam might be with her left me feeling humiliated and furious. Sensing my unease, Adam tried to bridge the gap between us. One evening, he held my hand and said softly, "I know things have been tough, but this project will pay off for us. When I'm back, we'll have more time together. I promise." For a moment, I wanted to believe him. But as we lay in bed that night, doubts crept in again. What if he's been with Linda all along? I thought. What if he's planning to leave me? The humiliation of the possibility burned in my chest, but I said nothing. The next day, I considered calling Nancy to vent my frustrations, but I stopped myself. The last thing I needed was her suspicion about my own weekend plans. Worse, if Nancy started asking questions, she might let something slip to Terry, one of Adam's closest friends. Damn it, I thought, my mind drifting to Ryan. The image of being with Ryan in my marital bed filled me with a mix of guilt and exhilaration. I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't stop. By Sunday afternoon, after dropping Ryan off, I was physically drained yet strangely content. The weekend had been a whirlwind of passion, but as I stepped into the quiet house, reality began to creep in. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, laundering the sheets, and preparing for Adam's return. Each task felt heavier than usual, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Adam came home that evening, exhausted but smiling. "I missed you," he said warmly, pulling me into a tight hug. His touch was familiar and comforting, but guilt flared in my chest as I forced myself to hug him back. The next few days only deepened my shame. Adam had planned a romantic weekend away for us as a surprise, a thoughtful gesture to show how much he cared. He wasn't involved with anyone else. There was no Linda, no affair. He had simply been working tirelessly to build our future together. That realization hit me like a freight train. Adam was a loving, devoted husband, and I had repaid him with betrayal. Every kind word, Every small act of love from him felt like a knife twisting deeper. I tried to act cheerful, which Adam mistook as enthusiasm for his romantic efforts. It led to nightly lovemaking, each time a painful reminder of how far I had strayed. For the first time in our marriage, I faked my climax. Something I'd never thought I'd do. His attentiveness was real, and yet I couldn't connect with it. Guilt swirled in my chest, but I convinced myself that faking it was the least I could do. On Thursday, an unexpected encounter shook me further. I ran into Nancy at the grocery store. She approached me with a cautious yet excited glint in her eye. "Nancy. What's going on?" I asked, curious about her energy. Her eyes lit up as she leaned in. "There's something different about you," she teased with a knowing smile, then paused, her expression softening. "I'm pregnant," she announced. "Terry and I are having a baby." "That's amazing," I said, pulling her into a hug. The happiness in her voice was infectious, and for a moment, I was genuinely caught up in her excitement. But later that night, my thoughts were elsewhere, back with Ryan. I couldn't stop thinking about him, the pull too strong to resist. That evening, I made sure he wouldn't forget me. Afterward, as we lay tangled on the carpet of his condo, I turned to meet his gaze. His dark eyes searched mine, an unspoken question hanging in the air. "Ryan," I said softly, breaking the silence. "You've been the best lover I've ever had. These past months have been incredible." His expression shifted, a shadow of realization crossing his face. "You're ending this, aren't you?" "Yes," I admitted. "I've decided to focus on my future with Adam. It's time to start a family." "But we don't have to stop," he argued, his voice edged with desperation. "You enjoyed tonight as much as I did." "I did," I admitted honestly, "but it's not fair to Adam, or to myself, to keep living like this." The next morning, I broached the topic with Adam. Over coffee, I told him, "I think it's time for us to start a family." Adam's brow creased, and he leaned back in his chair. "That's a big decision," he said slowly. "Work is intense right now. I might need a little more time to think about it." I nodded, trying to remain patient, though a part of me felt frustrated. "I understand," I said quietly, "but I've changed my mind. The time feels right now." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "But Adam, you said you wanted kids." "I do," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "Just give me a week or two to process it. Work's been overwhelming." I nodded, holding back tears. I knew pushing him would only make things worse, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. As I lay in bed that night, frustration gnawed at me. The life I had envisioned, the one where we started a family, felt increasingly out of reach. "It's Linda," I thought bitterly. My mind conjured images of Adam lost in thought, his silence growing heavier each day. I was convinced it wasn't worth keeping him distant. He was seeing her, I was sure of it. If I confronted him without proof, it would only drive him closer to her. I needed to act. He wouldn't abandon me, I told myself. The thought fueled my resolve. That night, I decided to stop taking birth control. It wasn't something I had planned before, but desperate times called for bold measures. The decision brought a strange sense of calm, helping me drift into a fitful sleep. The next few days were tense. Adam remained withdrawn, and every time he seemed preoccupied, my chest tightened. I stuck to my plan, coaxing him into making love twice that week, careful to keep things light and natural. He didn't suspect a thing. I'm still the loyal wife, I thought with a bitter smile. But my resolve wavered when Ryan called on Thursday, his voice smooth and persuasive. "All right," I said against my better judgment. "One last time." Ryan laughed, triumphant. "You won't regret it." Regret hit me immediately after I hung up, but I couldn't deny the spark of anticipation. "Just one more time," I told myself. "Then it's over for good." Later that day, I stood outside Ryan's door, nerves coiling in my stomach. I rang the doorbell, and he opened it almost immediately, pulling me inside and kissing me with a fierce hunger. Clothes scattered as we stumbled into the bedroom, shutting out the world. As I lay beside him afterward, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled. "I'm going to stop this," I said softly. Ryan turned to me, propping himself up on an elbow. "Do you really think you can?" His tone was calm but challenging. "I have to," I replied, avoiding his gaze. "Adam deserves better." Ryan's expression darkened. "And what about me?" he asked, his voice colder now. "What do I deserve, Claire?" The sharpness in his tone startled me. I didn't have an answer. Days later, my world began to unravel. Adam came home one evening, his face tight with tension. He held an envelope in his hand, one that he tossed onto the kitchen table. "Care to explain this?" My pulse raced as I opened the envelope, revealing printed photos. My heart stopped when I saw them. They showed me standing outside Ryan's door in a trench coat, holding it open suggestively. My face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but it was unmistakably me. Who took these?" I stammered, my mind scrambling for an explanation. "Don't play dumb, Claire," Adam said, his voice low and sharp. "Do you think I wouldn't find out? Do you think I'm that blind?" "Adam, it's not what it looks like," I lied, my voice trembling. "Those are photos of me picking up work documents from Ryan's place. You know Ryan, right? He works with me." That's all it was. Adam handed me another photo. This one made my stomach drop. It showed me clearly in the doorway, Ryan pulling me inside. My face wasn't visible, but the moment was unmistakable. "I don't know who this is or why you're showing me these," I said weakly, grasping for hope. Adam's eyes hardened as he looked at me. "Don't insult my intelligence, Claire." I was trapped. The carefully constructed facade of control I had built over the past few months was crumbling. I didn't know what Adam would do next, or what I could say to stop it. I pressed my fingers to the final photo in the stack, my breath catching as the last shred of hope crumbled. It showed me entering Ryan's condo, unmistakable despite the angle. My heart pounded as I looked up at Adam, his face unreadable but his eyes cold. "Adam, my voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I never meant for this to happen." Panic surged through me, and the words spilled out in a desperate rush. "It was only once, Adam. You have to believe me, it was just that one time." He shook his head slowly, his expression distant yet controlled. "Once," he said, his voice sharp and unforgiving. "Only once." His lips curled into a bitter smile. "A friend mentioned seeing you at that condo more than once. That's when I hired a private investigator." His words sent a jolt through me. "You, what?" Adam's voice was steady, each word hitting like a hammer. "The detective got surveillance footage from inside the building, on the floor where Ryan's condo is. I know for a fact you've been there twice in the past 2 weeks." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But the detective also spoke to someone else. Ryan hasn't been shy about what's been going on between you two." The room seemed to spin, my chest tightening as I tried to breathe. "Adam, please," I begged, my voice trembling. "You have to forgive me. I let myself get swept up, and once it started, I didn't know how to stop. I was afraid Ryan would tell people if I tried to end it." Adam's eyes narrowed, his silence stretching out unbearably. Desperation clawed at me as I dropped to my knees, tears spilling freely. "Please, Adam," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Give me another chance. I want to have your children. I want to be the wife you deserve. I'd be such a good mother, such a devoted wife." He stared at me for a long moment, and for a fleeting second, I dared to hope. But when he finally spoke, his voice was calm, deliberate. "Would it shock you to know," he said, his tone cutting through the air like a knife, that while you and Ryan were busy at his condo, I've been having an affair too? The words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping. No, you couldn't. I didn't think I'd ever get to this point, Claire, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. But after everything I've seen, after everything I've felt, I'm not even sure it matters anymore. I tried to speak, to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. The ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. Adam sighed and shook his head. I believe you, Claire. I believe you mean everything you're saying right now. But I also believed you when you said your vows on our wedding day. His voice hardened. And you broke those promises so easily, so repeatedly. I could never trust you again. Not ever. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, today was going to be the last time. I swear, Adam, I was going to end it. I would never have seen Ryan again if you hadn't found out. His face twisted into a bitter smile. If that's meant to comfort me, Claire, it isn't working. I sat frozen, unable to respond, as his calm demeanor gave way to something firmer, more resolute. I'm not going to let people think I'm the one who caused this, he said firmly. I've done everything I could to be a loyal husband. If anyone asks why we're divorcing, I'm not going to let them assume I was at fault. The finality of his words settled in like a lead weight. My fate was sealed. Anger surged through me, eclipsing my guilt for a moment. I can't accept that, I said, my voice wavering but defiant. I straightened, trying to sound braver than I felt. If you file on those grounds, Adam, I'll fight it, I said, my voice trembling with anger and desperation. I'll bring Linda into this. I'll countersue if I have to. Adam stared at me, his calm demeanor infuriating. Do whatever you think is right, Claire, he said coolly before turning and walking away. At work the next day, things took an uncomfortable turn. Barry, a colleague I'd never spoken to much, approached me with a smug grin. Hey, Claire, he said, leaning in far too close. I heard you're back on the market. I stiffened at his words, unsure how to respond. How about we grab some drinks after work, he continued, his tone suggestive. Maybe have a little fun. Then, to my shock, he reached out and ran his fingers lightly over my elbow. I stepped back immediately, glaring at him. You're married, Barry. You have a wife and kids. What are you thinking? I snapped. He smirked, completely unfazed. From what I've heard, that wouldn't bother you. You were married, and you were with another man. His eyes gleamed with mockery. Come on, it would just be a little harmless fun. No one needs to know. Disgusted, I pushed past him, my heart pounding. I hurried back to my desk, my face burning with humiliation. That evening, things went from bad to worse. As I was packing up my belongings, a woman stormed up to me, her face red with fury. I recognized her instantly, it was Lisa, Barry's wife. You stay away from my husband, she hissed, pointing an accusing finger at me. I froze, stunned. I just came over to say goodbye, I stammered, trying to explain. Don't you dare lie to me, she shouted, loud enough to draw the attention of others nearby. I've heard all about you and your morals. Everyone in the neighborhood knows what you've done. Her words cut deep, each one driving the knife of humiliation further. A small crowd began to gather, their whispers like static in my ears. I felt the weight of their stares pressing down on me. Without a word, I dropped the beer I'd been holding, turned, and pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down my face. They're acting like I'm some kind of infamous seductress, I thought bitterly, the humiliation unbearable. Days later, I made one final call to Nancy. I'd wronged her too, and I needed to make amends, no matter how painful it was. Nancy, I'm so sorry, I said, my voice thick with regret. I didn't know either, and I never meant to cause you trouble. I wasn't thinking straight back then. I wish you a beautiful, healthy baby and hope the three of you are very happy together. I also hope that, maybe one day, you can forgive me." Tears welled in my eyes as I started to hang up, but Nancy's voice stopped me. "Wait, Claire," she said softly. I held my breath. "I don't hate you," she continued, her tone conflicted. "It's just. Terry was so angry about everything. He'd be furious if he knew I was talking to you now." "I understand," I sniffled. "I'll make this quick. But it's best if you don't call again," she added, cutting me off. "For everyone's sake." Her words landed like a blow, and then the line went silent. By the end of the week, I had packed everything I needed into my car. The rest of my belongings were in storage, waiting to be shipped once I settled in my old hometown. It was time. Time to leave this city, this life, and the wreckage I had caused behind. As I drove toward the highway, I couldn't help but smirk when my route took me past Ryan's condo. It felt symbolic, like one last look at the chapter one was leaving behind. But as I glanced over, my breath caught, his sleek sports car was parked out front. Curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I pulled over. My heart pounded as I debated whether I should approach. That's when I saw her. Linda. She was standing at the curb, speaking to Ryan. The tension between them was unmistakable, and I strained to catch snippets of their conversation. She handed him an envelope with a businesslike nod. "Here's the $110,000 for taking on the job, plus another $1,000 for completing it successfully, just as we agreed." Ryan took the envelope, slipping it into his jacket pocket without so much as glancing at it. He gave her a smirk. "Pleasure doing business with you, Linda." Then, tilting his head curiously, he asked, "Why me? Why did you pick me to seduce Claire?" Linda rolled her eyes as if the answer were obvious. "Are you kidding? After living next to you for a year, watching the parade of women come and go, you were the perfect candidate. Charismatic, persuasive, and frankly, easy to manipulate." Ryan raised an eyebrow, leaning casually against his car. "Flattered," he said dryly. "But why go to all this trouble? You could have just seduced Adam yourself if you wanted him so badly." Linda's smile was cold. "Adam's loyalty to Claire is ironclad. He'd never leave her, not for me, not for anyone. That's one of the reasons I knew he was the one for me." Ryan's expression turned skeptical. "So, why now? Why involve me in this mess instead of trying to win him over years ago?" Linda's voice softened, her confidence unwavering. "Because timing is everything. After Claire's betrayal, Adam's trust in her is shattered. He's lonely, hurt, and vulnerable. He hates the idea of starting over, and I'm ready to be there for him." Ryan gave a low chuckle. "You're confident, I'll give you that. Don't you have any doubts?" Linda opened the door of a waiting cab, tossing him a dismissive smile. "Not at all. Adam's picking me up at the airport in 2 hours." Ryan shook his head as she climbed into the car. "You're something else, like a real Machiavelli." "No," she replied smoothly. "Just focused and highly motivated." She waved as the taxi drove away, leaving Ryan staring after her, disbelief etched across his face. 2 weeks later, Adam sat at a bar, swirling his drink thoughtfully as his coworker Matt joined him. "Big news," Matt said with a grin. "Turns out Ryan wasn't just playing around with Claire. There's another guy, Jared Garcia. Apparently, Ryan was sleeping with Jared's wife, and now they're both missing. Cops are looking into it, but Ryan's falling apart." Adam gave a bitter chuckle. "Karma," he said simply, raising his glass. Months passed. Adam stood in his office, packing the last of his belongings into a cardboard box. He felt someone's presence behind him and turned to see Linda standing in the doorway, a faint smile on her face. "You're really leaving?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yes," Adam said firmly. It's time for a change, a new career, a fresh start. Linda stepped closer, her expression unreadable. You don't have to go through this alone, Adam. I'm here. He didn't reply, only nodding slightly before picking up his box and walking past her. Halfway across the world, in Thailand, an ambulance raced toward the hospital. Inside, a medic spoke quietly into a radio, updating the team on a critical patient. Severe head trauma, possible internal bleeding. Name, Ryan Harper. A second medic added grimly, patient is unresponsive. ETA 3 minutes. The scene faded into chaos as the ambulance pulled up to the emergency bay. 7 months later, Adam stood on the porch of his new home, savoring the fresh air. His phone rang, the name, Matt, flashing on the screen. Adam smirked. Hello, Matt. How's life treating you? Not bad, Matt replied, his voice steady. I figured it out, Adam. All of it. Adam's smile widened as he stepped inside. Good for you, Matt, he said, his tone dripping with mock amusement. Let me know how that works out for you. As Adam hung up, his gaze settled on the horizon. The past was behind him now, but the threads of it continued to weave into something darker, something unresolved.